And now this is before Brexit even happened. He said that as citizens of the United Kingdom prepare to cast their votes in a nationwide referendum to decide whether or not to leave the European Union, a plan detailing the initial framework of the creation of the EU army is being kept hidden from the public until the day after the vote. So now the EU bureaucrats are claiming that this whole EU army program is a response to Brexit, but this proves that it was not at all. They had this plan for months.
But that exactly, but I mean, isn't it even more outrageous, Lord Monckton, than going back to Kit briefly, Daniels, that their answer is, we're not going to let you leave. I mean, I'm reading the draft of it, and it says, we're going to keep you in. We're one shared common group. Basically, we're going to make it harder for you to leave. They're admitting that, hey, you didn't get to vote to enter this. We're unelected, and we're going to let you leave.
Now, this European army idea has in fact been kicking around for a long time, and it's been gathering dust, but also gathering momentum among the totalitarian left, because since the fall of fascism and communism, the left have not had armies like that of Hitler and of Stalin at their disposal. And so they realize now they cannot out-argue us. They cannot speak against democracy and expect to be heard by democracy. They tried that. And even with all the elites backing only one side of the vote, it's the other side, the democratic side, that carried the day in Britain. So now, although I was born in a democracy, I do not live in one, I shall die in one. So the British people have won that. But the response, it's not a response to Brexit, this European army plan. It's been around for actually at least 15 years.
It's amazing.
And gathering momentum all that time. And as I say, the significance of this European army and the fact that only now are they admitting the latest stage in its development, as they knew perfectly well that there will be an even larger negative vote against the EU if this had come out in public. This just shows how little they care for how ordinary people think.
Lord Monckton, I want to go back to you in a moment. I want to go back to you in a moment, but I want to have Kit be able to chime back in one more time because he's been on this beat writing about it. But then I want to ask you, Monckton, so ruminate on this for about a minute. You've told us which shoe is going to drop next, years before it happened. Please tell us what you expect from the EU next, what their scams are going to be, how we counter this, and do you agree with me that regardless, it's one of the biggest victories in modern history against totalitarianism because we force the fact that, yes, we don't get to vote, you're unelected. World government's now out in the open. We've got world leaders like Donald Trump and Nigel Farage talking about mega banks. I mean, it seems to me this is just absolutely devastating events that in the end will sink these people. But just like Hitler didn't know he was beaten at Leningrad or at the Battle of the Bulge in the Ardennes, they're still going to fight on for a while. So I want to get your take, Lord Monckton, in just a moment. Finishing up, Kit, other points.
Yeah, I'm working on an article right now, Alex. I saw CNN yesterday, and they brought in a former ambassador, Christopher Hill, who said, quote, "The only way to make Europe more than the sum of member state diplomacies is to make it into a real state. Multi-level governance may be just about satisfactory for managing mountains of butter, but is barely suitable for making decisions about guns." And CNN brought this guy on as a quote, interview, but it's a little more than a propaganda piece.
Let me respond to that and then get Lord Monckton's response then to my three questions if you can remember them. Look, again, you look at the EU, it's always been there to destroy the nation states, get them into debt, and then fold them into the superstate. They wrote about that 50 years ago. So their conspiracy is public to those that are learned. It's not debatable. The problem is the general public now begins to understand that this is a wicked organization. But how do we take them to the next level to understand it's always been premeditated? Lord Monckton.
The first thing to do is to understand that this has now become, it didn't start as a premeditated attempt to take away democracy, but it has rapidly become exactly that as the people who are behind all this realized how feeble the response of nation states would be when they needed to defend themselves. And already what is happening as a result of this vote is that there are about 3.5 to 4 million signatures on a petition demanding there should be a rerun of the referendum in Britain because they don't like the result. And it'll be just like Denmark and Ireland, where they were made to vote again and vote again until they got the result that the governing class wanted. And only then was that referendum regarded as final. The same thing is now being attempted even with the British people. And I can tell you we're not going to like that very much. We are going to oppose this very vigorously. The more the governing establishment tries to discredit and dishonor and not to implement that referendum, the more strongly the support for freedom will grow among ordinary people. And eventually the Conservative Party, which is deeply divided on this and half of which still wishes that it could overturn this referendum and simply carry on as though it hadn't happened. You've got the whole of the Labour Party, which is effectively communist under its present leader, Jeremy Corbyn, now in disarray. But the disarray is mainly due to an argument about how far they should push a reversal of the people's will.
Okay, but am I right, though, that
the parliamentary bill that will be necessary to break us free of Europe? The referendum on its own doesn't do it. Parliament then has to do the people's will. And with the likes of the Labour Party and the Scottish National Workers' Party, all these parties that are left-wing, the so-called Liberals, so-called Democrats, who are neither, the so-called Greens, who are the destroyers of the planet. These people, they're all on the far left. I
understand, but long term,
they are going to fight and fight and fight to make sure that they will use the majority that they can muster in Parliament, together with a whole lot of Conservatives who aren't really Conservative at all, to vote down any bill to give effect.
So that's their next scam. Let me ask you this then.
Union. That's going to be the next battle.
Sure. I mean, just brief questions here fast, because I want your view on this. But do you agree with me, though, that the genie's out of the bottle? It's going to be a long fight, but there's no way, I mean, unless it's a total dictatorship, that they're ever going to be able to keep this thing in place. How long until you think Europe finally falls apart?
The people have spoken here in Britain. They haven't been allowed to speak almost everywhere else. Where they have been allowed to speak, they have tended to be told to go and vote again until they get the answer the elites want. That technique will no longer work. There is now a need for something I've mentioned before, which is an international grouping to advance the cause of liberty. No longer, if we stand alone as national parties, will we be strong enough to defeat
That's my next question about Trump.
Totalitarian monster.
You've talked about an open society of governments and peoples working together in shared cause so that the globalists just don't act like they're the only ones trying to have humanity come together. Why have we given them that power? We need something to counter that.
We do. We now need a Freedom International. I don't know what we'll call it, but something like that, which is a subscription membership party, which everybody joins from America, from Britain, from all the other countries of Europe and the Commonwealth and everywhere else where liberty still matters. Because if we don't stand together now, then we'll fall. As I think it was Benjamin Franklin used to say.
We'll hang separate.
We must all hang together, or assuredly we shall all hang separately.
And listen, I mean, Nigel Farage, I mean, I cannot stress, and yourself and the rest of the party, UKIP, coming from nowhere, now the fastest growing party in Europe, other parties joining, other parties picking up the nationalist rhetoric. This is beautiful. Le Pen, all the rest of it. I mean, this is clearly rising, and globally, this could bring in the new renaissance.
Remember that this is not a nationalist movement, UKIP. What UKIP is a democratic, freedom-loving movement. We are not there to say a nation state is the only way we can conduct our affairs. We are there to say that a European superstate that we do not elect and that our people cannot control, that is not the way forward for Europe any more than it is for our country.
Where they arrest people for their speech, where they exempt themselves from taxes. I mean, it's a new royalty, isn't it?
They exempt themselves from taxes. Worse, they exempt themselves also from civil suit and from criminal prosecution. And the people who run the central stability.
Yeah, tell folks who these new sovereigns are on these bureaucracies and how they set those up briefly. I mean, this is amazing.
Well, for instance, the European Stability Pact is a good example. This is the thing that was intended to address the collapse in the euro, which is still, of course, collapsing and will collapse still faster now that Britain's voted out. But they set up a governing body of absolute bankers, and these bankers have been given by the treaty establishing the Stability Pact total immunity from civil suit or criminal prosecution for any actions they take. And one of their actions that they are empowered by this treaty to take is to order any member state of the Stability Pact, fortunately not including Britain, to hand over any amount of money that they demand.
That's the bail-ins.
As soon as they demand it.
And that's how they're able to install leaders, too. That's how they're able to tell places like Greece or Italy, hey, here's your new leader.